All right, we're live on the Cowboy Perspective at the Texas Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association convention here in Fort Worth. I managed to rope a guy named Straddling Green into the booth to talk a little bit about his cowboy perspective and how that's played in his career and life and family and all these different things. So thanks for jumping in here, Straddling.
I appreciate it, Neil.
Super
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, spur of the moment, which is a lot of times where some of the best conversation, in my experience, comes from. So for the listeners, just give them a real quick, hey, this is who I am and where I come from.
So I'm Straddling Green, born and raised in Fort Worth. I know Neil through my family's got a ranch in Comanche, and I've had the opportunity to learn and work cows with Neil a little bit. The easiest way to describe myself is I tell people I was kind of born with 1 foot on the concrete and 1 foot on the dirt.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to embrace that and realize that, but that's kind of where my cowboy perspective begins,
so that's
I guess.
Great. Now I want to dig in on that a little
Yeah.
bit. So what do you mean it took you a while to embrace it? Did it feel like you wanted to be both feet on the dirt or both feet on the concrete? What was the thing you were struggling with, I guess?
Yeah, so I was always the ranch kid to my city friends, and I was always the city kid to my ranch friends.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of...
So that feels like you don't fit anywhere, doesn't it?
Sometimes it does. When I was in high school, I went to a private school in Fort Worth, which sounds kind of uppity, but I was also doing manual labor and building fence and spraying mesquite trees, and worked for a good friend and mentor, still one of my I call him my second dad. But we built cattle pens and metal buildings, and I'd call it general ranch construction. So when I was in high school, and then just had different influences in the city, and then different influences in the ranching world. And in my mid-20s, I just kind of decided to embrace it, and I am who I am instead of trying to fight it one way and get a corporate job in the city or try to make a living only in the ag industry. So
yeah, I mean that's
kind of where I ended up.
I love it. This is the beautiful thing about having a conversation. There's somebody a lot like you.
Oh yeah.
There's somebody a lot like me. And now, whether or not they happen to stumble across the Cowboy Perspective and listen to our conversation, I don't know. I kind of leave that in God's hands. But when they do, and if they do, they'll say, "Ooh, I can relate to Straddling, or I can relate to Neil." And it might just give them another way to look at it, or it might get them to their own personal journey, some piece of their own personal journey a little faster. I mean, this whole thing of feeling like you don't fit in, not knowing where you're going, I'm 46 and I still feel that way sometimes. It's like this podcast. I quit doing it for about 3 months because I was kind of being whiny about I'm not famous yet, or not everybody's listening, and comparing myself to Joe Rogan. Why can't I be like that? Well, that's unfair to me. It's unfair to Joe. All of these things. So if you're listening, if you're feeling that way, I totally understand. I think Straddling totally understands. All we can say is let it go, man. Just you're good. You got life in front of you. You're here to participate.
Yeah.
So it's such a lucky thing. All right, so cool. Thanks for that little insight into where you're going. Now, as we talk, in the back of your brain, be searching for a little story that you want to tell that's either your granddad, your grandma, your dad, your mom, brother, mentor, that relates the cowboy perspective in your life to how you navigate the world today, whether it's business.
I've listened to the podcast before, so I've it's kind of actually listening to your podcast has made me think about my personal cowboy perspective a handful of times.
All right, good.
You want me to kick off a little bit?
Yeah, kick off. Tell me about it. I mean, I love it.
Yeah. So when I was born, I was raised in Fort Worth my whole life, and Fort Worth was a lot different in the 90s than it is today, even in the early and mid 2000s than it is today. My dad grew up in a small town outside of Fort Worth called Aledo.
Yeah. Small town.
Yeah, it's a city
right.
now.
Yeah, that's right. It changes.
I know. I got a buddy she's on the development board for Aledo, and it's crazy. But he grew up in south of Aledo, actually, in a smaller town called Annetta.
Okay.
And his parents had a small place out there. They had businesses in Fort Worth, but he got to grow up around a lot of big ranches out there. And so when I was a kid, I mean, the first time I fell off a horse, I was wearing a diaper. We kept horses out there, and we could get out there pretty quick. And then my dad had some friends that had a roping arena, so we'd spend a lot of afternoons playing around out there and pushing steers for them and riding around. So I always grew up around horses. And then my mom's grandfather worked for Purina and was a farm manager for a prison in East Texas. So they had we spent a lot of time out there too at their
Huntsville,
farm.
was it?
No, it was a small town in Anderson County called Tennessee Colony.
Okay.
About 2.5 hours east of Fort Worth.
Yeah.
And then when kids were watching cartoons and stuff, I was watching John Wayne movies. So that's my cowboy heart was instilled at a pretty young age.
Yeah.
And then when my parents bought the place in Comanche in '98, it took me a while to realize, but that was one of the greatest gifts they ever gave their kids was this. I hate to call it a playground, but it was a giant playground where we lived and learned, and they were strict on a handful of things, but they let us kind of grow up and be wild out there. And
yeah,
we would saddle up horses, and they'd say, you can go as far as long as you can see this truck and trailer, I can see you. And so that's and then I got to watch that ranch develop over the past 30 years and change into what it is now. But that's kind of my background. And then, like I said, grew up in Fort Worth, so I was going to school here and playing sports in town and that sort of thing. But I don't ever refer to myself as a cowboy just because I have too much respect for guys that do it every day.
That's right.
Like it almost feels weird, but like Johnny Conine, I consider a great mentor to me, and
right.
I pick Johnny's brain on a lot of stuff. And I'd kind of find it disrespectful to Johnny if I put myself in the same category. But so that's kind of my background on that.
Yeah.
And same for Sonny Bowles, the guy I worked for in high school, my mentor. He was a day working hard cowboy before he went to start his business, and so he still got a lot of cowboy heart and all that.
I was talking to a guy. This has been a really fun booth for me because pretty much everybody that walks by has a great cowboy perspective, and I get a chance to get a few of them in here and record it. One of the guys I was talking to worked with Tom Morehouse a little bit and was on cattle drives, and he said it'd be like 30 degrees in the morning. They're riding out to go gather cattle, and they're long trotting, and he's like freezing to death and thinking this ain't any good. Tom would come trotting by and kind of slow down by him and say, what's too hard for most men is just right for me.
Yeah.
So that was like a cowboy hard as nails kind of thing. Johnny's like that a little bit. I say a little bit just because I hope he's listening and give him a hard time. He's a lot like that. And Johnny is a great guy in a million ways. Not just for the cowboy, but for the role he plays in the community as the justice of peace and stuff that Johnny does. So shout out to Johnny.
Yeah, shout out to Johnny.
He's a really
Conine.
awesome guy.
And like, for instance, one day, and another guy that's been a huge, that we don't talk a lot, but every time we're around, I sit down and make sure that my ears are open, is Gerald Burns.
Yeah.
And your podcast with Gerald, I'd known Gerald since I was a little boy and grew up with, was around a lot of the guys that Gerald grew up with in the Crescent area and Crowley area. And I'd never heard any of those stories. Yeah. And, but to go back to it, last year we worked at your place. I think it was 20-something degrees one day, and then we were at our place the next week, and it was 14 degrees. Yeah. And I was like, well, and Johnny and I were enthusiastic about it, and Gerald was out there, and said, if Gerald's out there, then you've got no excuse to be in bed.
That's a certain piece of what has been valuable to me growing up in that culture and that reality is a lot of stuff that some people perceive as hard, doesn't even register on
Yeah.
my. It just doesn't seem like it should get a second thought. You just, hey, we're working cattle today. Yeah, but it's cold. What are you even mentioning that for? Today is the day.
Yeah.
Like it's what we do. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, that's a good example. Billy, Gerald, so many people have poured those thought processes and truths into me that, it's almost like I'm so grateful to have it
sure.
because I didn't really have to earn it. They gave it to me in a way. I say, really doing hard things is what humans are made for.
I think one of the best things that ever happened to me and was when I was turning 16 in April of 2006, and my dad told me, he said, you better have a job by the end of February. If you don't, you're going to work for Sonny, and that's that.
Yeah.
And I thought, kind of in the back of my head, I'm a little lazy by nature, and I'm not type A at all. And compared to my old man, for
I
sure.
know we got to talk about him a little bit. We'll have to mention Chuck just for a little
anyways,
bit.
I thought, Sonny's a cool guy. I've known him my whole life. Can't be that bad. Well, I learned real hard what 100 plus post holes in an afternoon looks like and that sort of stuff. And I loved it. I took to it.
Yeah.
I loved the guys that I worked with. And then so I'd work all week long. Then I'd drive to the ranch on Friday night, work for my dad on Saturday. And Sunday was kind of my only day off.
Yeah.
But it kept me out of trouble in the summers. It kept me working with my hands, and you feel a physical difference in your body and that sort of thing. And I never really shook it. I didn't take well to college when I got there because I liked working with my hands and doing that stuff. So when I found a career path where that's why construction and real estate, I can be out and about. I'm not just sitting in an office all day.
I learned at a young age, really hard work can be a lot of fun done with the right people.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you're goofing off. It means you're working your tail off, but you're enjoying it together.
And
you pick on each other a little bit, all these things.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And you better be able to take it and dish it out just as well as you can.
Yeah, that's right.
And one thing, a little quick story on that too. I was sitting with my mom and my aunt a couple weeks ago, and we were watching my daughter, she's 2, play around. And something, my mom said, she was like, I mean, when y'all would get grounded, you put a 5-gallon backpack on and you spraying mesquites all day. That'll get your mind right,
Yeah,
no headphones, no nothing, no iPods,
That's
nothing.
right.
Just,
I've been there, brother. I've been there.
I said something. I said, and we call her Momo. I said, Momo's not going to be above that either. And my aunt said, oh, that pretty girl is not going to be doing that. And my mom goes, yes, she is. Yeah.
That's right. It would kind of be unfair to Momo if you don't
Exactly. Yeah.
give her that experience. I think about it with my daughters. 3 girls, beautiful little ladies, but they're gonna know. I'm kind of doing a Donald Trump thing here. But I want them to know how to work. I don't want them to think, that they depend on anybody else. Like they have the ability to dig it out of the dirt and build something themselves. And that's not always a fun lesson, but it's a very important one.
And Mo learned a couple weeks ago, don't put your face over the front of a horse. We were feeding horses, and I was holding her, and she leaned over to kiss one, and he kind of popped up and split her lip right in the middle.
Man.
But that's kind of installing or putting that cowboy perspective in her too. I want her to enjoy it, have fun with it, but know that it's serious too, and there's a lot of heart and passion and to what goes into some of that stuff.
Yeah. All right. Now you've been able to prepare. I need one Chuck story. Come on.
One Chuck story?
Yeah, something that
Ooh.
I don't know.
Okay, here's a ranching story from my dad. It's me and my dad and my brother, and I was probably middle school, and we had a 1989 single cab Ram truck out on the ranch, and that's how I learned to drive. And I could probably find the same exact place in the pasture where we were at, but he said, my dad's a pretty demanding, hard driving man, and he said, drive between those 2 trees, drive right there. Dad, I can't make that. And he said, son, I said drive the truck, push it through there, and I crunched the truck on one of the doors between two mesquite trees. And when we went to get the truck fixed, the only door they had was an old yellow, like banana yellow door.
Yeah.
So that old truck sat on the ranch for 10 years. After that,
banana yellow
forever
door.
with just a yellow door. But that's a little story of him being
so what do you
driving
think
hard, but
right.
also costing him a new door for.
Well, you bet.
That.
I wonder, what's your speculation? What was his point there? Was he trying to teach you something, or was he just wanting you to do what you were told and not think? Like, what's your speculation?
Probably a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Probably more, and it was probably his personal agenda at the moment, but we ended up learning probably something more after that.
Yeah.
It's funny. I tell people all the time, the older I get, the closer I get to my dad.
Oh, yeah.
And
I think it's true for everybody.
And I never really put that together till the last few years, and especially going out on my own in the business world. He's really, I don't know if it's empathetic, but he understands. I mean, and I'm doing it a little bit younger than when he went out on his own, and there's a mutual respect for that sort of thing, and yeah, just kind of trusting that I know what I'm talking about sometimes, and it's been really fun the past few years with me and him.
You bet. I think that's I'm not sure why God set it up like that, but it's kind of true. Like, you don't really appreciate your parents till you're kind of out there on your own. Maybe you have a kid and you start saying, oh my gosh, this is what they were doing all of these times. I love being around your dad. He's he adds energy.
Yeah,
wherever he
not
is.
short on that.
Yeah. I mean, and I like energy, so I really like being around him. Now, in all fairness, some people aren't interested.
He's not everybody's cup of tea
in the extra energy, but
and if you
I
are
think
everybody's
he's so
cup
genuine,
of tea,
he's so he just really cares deep. I appreciate that about him a lot.
But
so
he's super type A, and in his heyday, I mean, 3:30 in the morning every morning, nonstop. I mean, I've got friends, and I mean, Johnny's been subject to it, and anybody else. You'll get a text at 4 a.m. sometimes, or a voicemail. And
he's just taking care of business, and you don't build the things that he's built without having some of that hard pressing. Has he ever told you any stories from his childhood or something?
Yeah, so
because I'm pretty sure I'll never get him on the podcast.
Yeah, he's got some pretty cool stories. So his parents actually divorced when he was younger, and his mom moved to San Angelo. And he got in, his best friend in San Angelo is a guy named Lee Puckett. If any of y'all know him, Lee's a great human being. He's got a land brokerage out in San Angelo. And Lee's family had a ranch, and Lee's dad, LW, kind of took my dad under his wing.
Yeah.
And they got some wild stories about running through wide open country back then, and I think that had a heavy influence on him. Yeah. And then when he moved back to Aledo for high school, and then he got to be around that group of ranchers and some of those guys, that really his dad was a hard driving guy, and was a military guy. My grandfather was, and so.
Well, I think I love those insights into just everybody's life. We're all kind of spinning around here on the same rock, but we're not having the exact same experience. That's what the Cowboy Perspective is about. Thanks for coming here and sharing it. Although I got one last question and one last thing to explore. So now that you're a dad,
yes, sir. How
do you think about that role? Like, how important do you feel like it is?
I love it. It's the coolest. It's the single best thing that's ever happened to me in my life, and my wife will tell you that too, from her perspective too. But it's also very important to me that I give her some of that stuff my parents gave me. That opportunity to go be wild, to go explore and be around. I mean, she loves it. The cows and horses. I got a stack of pictures on my phone of her being around the horses and stuff, and it's important to me that she understands, the discipline and the camaraderie, and some of the heart that this ag group of people have. I don't know how else to what I'm trying to say a little bit there,
I
but
totally
it's
understand
important to me that she has her own cowboy perspective.
I think the way I think about it is, I want my kids to scuff knees,
Yeah, play hard.
bust lips,
Yeah,
get real close to bad wrecks, but not have a bad wreck.
yeah,
So you've got a little bit of a tool there that helps you navigate life, because life is full of these
yeah.
split lips, broke noses, stuff.
Figure it out.
Yeah,
and
scrapes.
Don't get in too big of a bind.
Yeah, that's right. Got to protect yourself, but don't be afraid to get out there. Hey, everybody, thanks for listening. Sterling, thanks for coming
Appreciate it,
on.
Neil. Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's a cool experience.
Yeah, good deal, good deal. Appreciate you doing it.
Yes,
I really
sir.
do, because, like I said earlier, somebody's going to relate to you that listens.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
And they're going to have a chance to say, oh, there's a guy just like me, and he's gone and done these things, and I'm going to pay attention to the things you do. So, Oh, and by the way, you're a dang good hand on the calf branding crew, so
Sometimes.
keep coming.
Yeah,
keep
sometimes.
coming. All right, everybody, talk to you later.